I'm Shana Khalafi. We are following the latest out of the situation in Iran. We know that thousands have been killed as the Islamic regime brutalizes protesters. Activists saying that number could be much higher than the reports. We also know that President Trump has given repeated warnings to the Islamic regime in Iran about possible U.S. strikes as the U.S. is building up its military presence in the region. We are following this closely, and for more on this, we want to bring in Associated Press reporter Farnoosh Amiri. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start with the latest news from overnight. We know there were several blasts reported within Iran in different cities. According to state TV, there are at least 5 people killed, several others injured. The Iranian government blaming gas leaks for those explosions, although some were speculating there may have been an attempted assassination of a naval commander. The state denied that. What do we know so far about these blasts, as both the U.S. and Israel also saying they were not involved? What do we know?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. If you paid attention the last time tension this high between the U.S. and Iran, you saw that, what began to be a 12-day war with Israel really started as these, incidents happening and no one really taking credit for them or taking responsibility. And obviously the government of Iran not being straightforward about what were the causes of these incidents. And so, everyone is watching to see if these incidents are directly related to the threats that the U.S. has made against Iran in recent weeks, and whether or not it's a warning, it's a strategic, symbolic move, or it's going to become an all-out war. And I think what Iranian officials have told me is that they see any move by the U.S. or Israel as an all-out war. They are not going to be, according to them, as apprehensive and as restrained as they were in June of last year, when both the U.S. and Israel struck, major targets inside Iran, including several nuclear facilities.
And we know that thousands of Iranians have been killed in these anti-regime protests. President Trump has told the government to stop that violence towards protesters. He even said that help was on the way for the Iranian people. But as you've been reporting lately, it seems like he's been more vocal about deterring Iran's nuclear program. So explain this shift, and what exactly is Trump demanding from the Iranian government at this point?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, talking to folks inside Iran and outside, many were waiting for President Trump to take action against the Islamic Republic. He even went as far as saying help is on the way, and encouraged thousands of people to continue protesting. And many of those people, as you said, were killed. And the death toll is still unknown to most independent journalists and even human rights watchers. So it was a very interesting move by the president to say something like that at such a heightened tension inside Iran. But in recent weeks, he has taken on that focus on the protesters and shifted it, zoomed out to the 30,000-foot view of the nuclear program. Obviously, the U.S. has been, from Republican and Democratic presidents alike, has targeted Iran's nuclear activities, has accused it of wanting to build a nuclear bomb, despite Iran insisting that they have a peaceful nuclear program. And, the president of the United States has said that this was always going to be about cutting down the nuclear threat that they believe Iran poses. But it has been interesting to see how he has shifted away from the protests and wanting to respond to the thousands killed to wanting to make a deal with Iran.
And both President Trump and Iranian officials have said that they would like to reach a deal, but they've also said that they are ready to fight if it comes to that. So where does this stand now? Are there any conversations in the works? And what are we hearing from both sides as of late?
I mean, there's so many efforts right now to squash the tensions, right? We have regional players, including, our reporting of Oman, Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia defense minister came all the way to Washington yesterday to get this message across to the U.S. officials directly. And we have, there's reporting about Qatari officials going to Tehran today. So there are efforts from all the regional actors to be able to lower the temperature on this. But the question remains, will that work? I mean, we saw what was happening. The Iranians were in Oslo, ready to have the sixth round of talks last year when Israel struck and U.S. followed. So it's really unclear whether these moves are meant to be de-escalating, or they're meant to be, a similar playbook that the U.S. played last year, which is kind of catching Iran off guard by bringing up the notion of wanting a deal.
And you spoke a little bit about the other leaders in the region who have said that if the U.S. strikes Iran, that it could lead to a more widespread regional conflict. So if there is a U.S. strike, what can we expect to come afterwards? What other countries could get involved here?
I mean, what's been really interesting this time around that was not the case last in June is that several of those regional allies, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, have said that their airspaces and are closed to any efforts by the U.S. to strike Iran. So the U.S. has in some ways less of a green light from those countries than it did this time, than it did last year. And so they have really just like drawn the line. And obviously the Arab states are warning Iran that if the U.S. does strike, they should be really, really calculated in how they respond. Last time in June, they responded by hitting a U.S. airspace in Qatar. And obviously that really broke up the relationship, the close ties that Qatari and Iranian officials have together. So there's been lots of warnings by both sides. What remains now is, will they heed to those warnings?
And last thing here, something that we're watching very closely this weekend, and the U.S. government also going to be watching, Iran conducting some live fire naval drills Sunday and Monday in the Strait of Hormuz. So the U.S. has already moved an aircraft carrier nearby, and they've warned Iran to not get too close to American forces when they do these drills. So what can we expect from the drills and the possible aftermath of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the amount of U.S. military assets in the region are not to be understated right now. Obviously, it is not to the extent of which the U.S. The military buildup in Venezuela before the capturing of Maduro earlier this month, but it is significant, and it isn't. These aren't just shows. These aren't just acts to show off, and it's very much calculated. And what Iran is doing is they're showing that this is their region. They are able to practice and do live drills. And what will be interesting to see is how much restraint both sides pose, as they conduct these drills tomorrow.
All right, we will be watching closely, as will the world. Thank you so much, Farnoosh, for joining us and for lending your expertise here.
Thank you for having me.